No one at Ridgeview High could have predicted that the quiet girl they once forgot would return 10 years later with secrets humming under her skin like distant engines, or that the night would shift from ordinary nostalgia to something far stranger. Something that began the moment Ava Torres stepped into the building with a stillness that didn't belong in a small-town reunion. If you've ever known what it feels like to be underestimated, or to carry a story no one else is ready to hear, then take a moment to like and subscribe. You'll recognize this journey long before the rest of them do. Even now, before anyone else sees it, there's a certain tension in the air around her, like the faint metallic scent before a storm, and though the gymnasium smells of lemonade, old varnish, and too sweet perfume, Ava walks through the wide double doors as though she's entering a briefing room rather than a high school decked in cheap streamers and fading memories. She looks exactly 28. Not young enough to be naive, not old enough to be weary, but carved by something undeniable, something that has sharpened her posture and steadied her gaze. Her classmates, buzzing around the registration table like bees around a dropped soda can, don't notice at first. Nostalgia tends to blind people to anything that doesn't fit their remembered script. The moment her name is written on the flimsy sticker, Ava T, because she doesn't bother adding a last name that no one ever learned to pronounce correctly, the first whispers begin floating through the air like dust motes caught in the colored lights. Ava? She actually came. What does she even do now? Didn't she fail out somewhere? Some try to hide their curiosity behind polite smiles, but the tone is unmistakable. The same tone used on stray dogs or broken vending machines. Pity and dismissal dressed as interest. Ava feels each whisper, but only the way one feels rain hitting a windshield. Noticed, but irrelevant. The narrator in me watches her take the scene in, not with bitterness, but with that quiet observational clarity people earn only through years of navigating unfamiliar terrain with a map no one else can read. She moves to the side, letting the clusters of old friend groups reform around her like her presence is a stone in the current, altering the flow but never part of it. Chelsea Kramer, dazzling as always and surrounded by an entourage of well-groomed nostalgia, spots her from across the room. Chelsea's gaze is the same as it was a decade ago, bright, assessing, and slightly predatory, the kind that makes people stand a little straighter without knowing why. She approaches with the glide of someone used to conquering any room she enters, and the air around them tightens. Ava Torres, Chelsea says with a smile that doesn't touch her eyes. You made it. Wow. I honestly didn't think you would. The old reflexes in the room kick in. Conversations thin, eyes sharpen. People lean closer in subtle, almost subconscious angles. The hierarchy of high school, that invisible scaffolding everyone swears they've grown past, still exists here in the scuffed gym floor and the brittle laughter. Ava gives a small polite nod, the kind you'd give an acquaintance on a bus. Didn't think I'd have time, she says truthfully, though the reasons behind that lack of time are far larger than any of them realize. Chelsea tilts her head, studying her in a way that is half curiosity, half skepticism. So what do you do now? It is not a friendly question. It is a measuring one, a question coated in the kind of sugar that dissolves to reveal sharp edges. Around them, a few more classmates linger, pretending to be interested in the punch table, but clearly hooked on the unfolding moment. Ava gives a small, non-committal shrug, honest, but intentionally incomplete. I move around a lot. Chelsea laughs, light, dismissive. Still drifting, huh? Some people never really figure it out. The group around her chuckles. Obediently, and for a moment, it is easy to believe nothing has changed in 10 years, that Ava Torres remains the quiet, forgettable girl from senior year who wore the same shoes too long and never once raised her hand in class. But something in Ava's eyes, steady, unbothered, faintly amused, makes a few people falter, sensing a discrepancy they cannot name. She excuses herself lightly, and I watch as she drifts across the gym, not aimless but deliberate, scanning exits, windows, the parked cars visible through the glass. Her gaze is the kind used by people who are trained to notice what others overlook, small details, escape routes, the micro-expressions of strangers. A man near the DJ booth fumbles with a balloon arch, the strings snapping against his wrist, and she flinches. Not visibly, not dramatically, but with a split-second tension so subtle only someone truly paying attention would see it. No one is. They're too busy laughing loudly, exaggerating stories of their successful lives, flaunting engagement rings and business cards like medals. Ava slips outside for air, and the narrator steps closer to the edge of the moment, sensing the storm building at the horizon of the evening. The night outside is quiet, the parking lot lit by the flickering yellow glow of old sodium lamps. And in that emptiness, Ava finally breathes. Her phone buzzes, one vibration, followed by two short pulses. A coded message. A location ping. She glances at it, expression unreadable, and pockets the device with the ease of someone long accustomed to sudden calls to action. Behind her, through the gym windows, silhouettes dance, laugh, pose for photos, oblivious to how small their world truly is. The narrator knows what they don't, that this calm is temporary, that the night will not end the way anyone expects, and that the girl they mocked as a failure is standing on the edge of a revelation large enough to split the evening open like thunder. Ava turns back toward the glowing gym doors, ready to re-enter, ready to let the night play out just a little longer before everything changes. She doesn't know it yet, but her ride is already on its way. The night had begun to thin around the edges by the time Ava stepped back into the gym, a soft buzz of tired laughter and slurred nostalgia drifting through the warm, crowded air as people milled around with half-empty cups, and the faint disappointment that reunions always carry, the unspoken realization that the past cannot be resurrected and that no one ever becomes exactly what they once imagined. Yet as Ava re-entered the room, her presence barely a ripple in the churning surface of conversation, something in her demeanor shifted, a subtle tightening of her shoulders, a deepening of her breath, as if she were listening for a frequency no one else could hear. From across the gym, her phone buzzed again, short, precise, unmistakably urgent, and although she didn't check the screen, the flicker of alertness behind her eyes confirmed everything. Whatever she had been waiting for had arrived. The chatter around her rose and fell like waves against a dock. Classmates swapping stories about promotions, marriages, divorces, failed startups, and the mundane triumphs and quiet disappointments of adulthood. In the far corner, Chelsea's group had grown louder, their laughter brittle and edged with the smugness of people who believed they were winning at life simply because they had learned to curate the illusion of success. Chelsea herself spotted Ava again and drifted toward her with that queen bee glide, the same instinctive social grace she'd wielded like a weapon a decade ago. Heading out already? She asked, trying to sound casual, but failing to hide the relief in her voice, as though Ava's presence at the reunion, silent, observant, impossible to categorize, was somehow unsettling the hierarchy she had expected to reign over without challenge. Ava gave a small polite nod. "I've got somewhere to be." Chelsea tilted her head with feigned sympathy. "Work?" The condescension was soft, coated in honey. "We're like one of those on-call gigs." Ava's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "Something like that." Chelsea laughed, too loudly. "Well, hey, don't be a stranger. It was good seeing you." But it wasn't good, not for her. The unease in Chelsea's eyes was unmistakable, as though she sensed something about Ava didn't quite match the narrative she'd built in her head. But before she could pry further or toss out a final bard, the gym doors opened and a gust of cool night air swept inside, followed by a distant, low rumble that made the windows tremble in their frames. Someone near the drink table frowned. "Thunder." Another shook his head. "Clear skies all week." The sound grew deeper, heavier, vibrating through the floor before anyone could place it. People drifted toward the exit out of instinct, curiosity tugging them forward, and for a moment the gym became a moving tide of silhouettes funneling toward the doors. Then the rumble intensified, a mechanical roar that rolled across the parking lot like an approaching storm, and several classmates stepped outside with their phones raised toward the sky. "What the hell is that?" someone asked, shielding their eyes. "A plane. Too low." "No. Holy crap, is that?" As Ava stepped into the open doorway behind a crowd, she didn't look up immediately. Instead, she scanned the horizon with the faint smile of someone recognizing an old friend long before they arrive. And then the sky split open. A matte black HH-60 Black Hawk swept over the field, banked hard, and descended toward the football turf with a controlled fury that sent a gale of rotor wash blasting across the pavement. People screamed and stumbled back as dust billowed and loose papers spiraled into the air. The helicopter hovered for a breathless heartbeat, its running lights slicing through the darkness, and then it touched down. Firm, precise, undeniable. The side door slid open in one smooth motion, and inside sat 6 Navy SEALs, not in dress blues or formal uniforms, but kitted out in mission gear, helmets clipped to their belts, gloves tucked into vests, expressions sharp and battle-tested. One of them, a broad-shouldered operator with a tactical headset draped around his neck, leaned out of the cabin and scanned the crowd with the ease of someone accustomed to chaos. "Where's Torres?" he shouted, his voice carrying over the thundering blades. And the moment the name left his mouth, the entire reunion froze as though someone had pressed pause. 30 pairs of eyes swung instantly toward Ava, who stood at the threshold of the doorway, calm as a still lake beneath a burning sky. Chelsea's expression collapsed, her confidence evaporating in a heartbeat as realization and disbelief spread across her face. "Ava," she breathed, almost choking on the name. They're calling you?" Ava stepped forward, the wind from the Black Hawk whipping her hair across her cheek, and for the first time all night, she seemed to expand, her presence filling the space with a gravity none of them had ever seen in her before. Her movements were unhurried but decisive, the gait of someone who had walked across tarmacs in foreign countries, through dust and gunfire, under night vision and red lights. Someone who belonged to a world far larger than the one these people had ever imagined for her. "Torres," the SEAL in the doorway called again, lifting a hand in acknowledgement the moment he spotted her. "Let's go. Bird's hot." A few classmates stumbled backward as she passed, as though proximity alone cracked their understanding of reality. One finally managed to stammer. "Ava, what? Who are they?" She didn't break stride. "Coworkers," she answered simply, and good God, the way she said it, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world, sent a collective shiver through the stunned crowd. Chelsea, her voice shaking, grabbed at the last thread of her worldview. "Ava, are you like military?" Ava paused just long enough to meet her eyes. "Something like that," she said, though the truth, heavy and classified, lived several layers deeper. She wasn't just military. She was special operations flight crew attached to some of the most elite units on Earth. Before Chelsea could form another question, Ava climbed aboard the Black Hawk with the practiced ease of someone who'd done it hundreds of times. A SEAL offered his gloved hand. She ignored it, grabbed the frame, and swung herself in. "Seats waiting for you, LT," he said with a grin. The others looked relieved, truly relieved, to see her, and that alone told the reunion crowd everything they had never known. Ava Torres was not a failure. She was the person elite warriors trusted with their lives. The door slid shut. The rotors thundered. The Black Hawk lifted into the night sky, leaving behind a parking lot full of stunned faces and a gymnasium buzzing with disbelief. Whispers rising like smoke from a fire just ignited. And below, Chelsea stood motionless, mascara stinging her eyes in the wind, watching the girl she once mocked vanish into the sky like a myth finally revealing itself. The night settled into a strange, unsettled quiet after the Black Hawk disappeared beyond the tree line, its thundering rotors fading into a hum that lingered in the bones of everyone left behind, as though the air itself hadn't decided yet how to fill the space she'd carved through it. And the reunion, once a carnival of nostalgia and shallow bragging, became a scattered, murmuring congregation of people struggling to understand what they had just witnessed. Some stood rooted to the parking lot asphalt, their expressions slack with disbelief, while others drifted back inside the gym in stunned silence. Though even the music, left running by the DJ who had bolted to the door like everyone else, seemed quieter now, like the speakers had lost confidence in their purpose. Chelsea remained outside the longest, her arms wrapped around herself not for warmth but for anchoring, staring at the empty field where dust still swirled in slow spirals, as if hoping the helicopter might circle back and return Ava to the version of memory Chelsea was more comfortable with. But the truth hung heavy and undeniable. She had never known the girl she mocked. Not then, not now, not in any meaningful way. And she felt that unfamiliar, sharp twist in her chest, the early sting of remorse mixed with an unsettling admiration that tasted like defeat. Inside, conversations erupted in clusters, Did you see that? They knew her name. Those were seals, right? Like the real ones. And each retelling grew larger, more dramatic, as though the reunion guests were desperate to insert themselves into the moment, to anchor their proximity to Ava in a story that subtly mattered. But beneath all the spectacle, beneath the chaos of rewoven narratives, there was a slow bloom of something deeper in the room. The collective realization that they had overlooked someone extraordinary for an entire decade. Someone who had slipped beneath their shallow social radar, not because she was insignificant, but because she had outgrown the smallness of the world they had all stayed inside. As the gym staff began tearing down decorations and gathering abandoned cups, the last few stragglers lingered in tight circles, their voices hushed now, thoughtful, almost reverent, and the narrator in me sees something remarkable happening in those quiet, reflective expressions. People re-examining their memories, replaying old scenes, reshuffling the unkind judgments they once tossed carelessly at a girl who spent lunchtime alone not because she lacked value, but because she had been preparing, in her own silent way, for a life none of them had the imagination to foresee. And high above the town, slicing through the night sky, Ava sat strapped into the Black Hawk's jump seat, her gear bag wedged at her feet, the cabin's red safety lights painting shifting shadows across her face as the operator beside her handed over a briefing tablet with a wry smile that said "Welcome back to the real world." She took it without a word, her focus already transitioning from the reunion's emotional weight to the sharp clarity of operational readiness, because the mission alert she'd received earlier wasn't a drill. It was a priority tasking requiring immediate redeployment, and her extraction team had rerouted specifically to pick her up the instant her short leave ended. The SEALs talked among themselves in low voices, trading banter and mission-prepped shorthand. But every few minutes, their eyes flicked toward her with the kind of instinctive respect that doesn't need explanation. They trusted her because she had earned it in deserts and mountain ranges, in hostile airspace under tracer fire, in the narrow window between catastrophe and salvation. And one of them finally leaned toward her with a grin and asked, "So, good reunion?" She exhaled a laugh under her breath, small but real. "Better now," she answered, and the cabin cracked with quiet chuckles. Yet as she turned her gaze to the window, watching the town shrink beneath them, its familiar streets, its dim porch lights, its high school roofline fading into the distance, she felt something soften, not regret, but a kind of closure she hadn't expected to find. Not because she'd proven anything to anyone, but because the past no longer pulled at her. She had walked into that gym as the version of Ava they remembered, and flown away as the Ava she had become. Back on the ground, rumor would ripple through the town in the days that followed. Whispers of Ava Torres, the girl who vanished after graduation only to reappear a decade later aboard a helicopter full of elite operators. Wild speculations would spread, embellished by those desperate to rewrite their memories of her. But the truth remained far simpler and infinitely more powerful. Ava had never been a failure. She had never drifted. She had been carving her path through shadows and fire and foreign skies while they were measuring lives in pay raises and promotions. And in that final image, her silhouette framed by the glow of the helicopter's interior lights as she adjusted her headset and nodded to the crew chief, the narrator sees the story's true conclusion, not the spectacle of her departure, not the stunned faces she left behind, but the quiet certainty in her expression, the unmistakable knowledge that greatness is rarely recognized in its early form. Legend, as it turns out, doesn't need an audience. It grows in silence, it hardens in adversity, and when it finally reveals itself, sometimes in the roar of a Black Hawk descending onto an old football field, it does so not to impress the past, but to rise fully into the future. And so Ava Torres, once invisible, now indispensable, disappeared into the night with the ease of someone stepping into her rightful world, leaving behind only a whirlwind of dust and a town full of people who would never see failure the same way again.